Thank you, Dana. Good evening and welcome to the March meeting of the Northborough Conservation Commission. My name is Greg Young. I'm the chair of the commission. And this open meeting of the Northborough Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Healy's executive order of March 29th, 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Northborough Conservation Commission are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the Northborough Conservation Commission to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Dan Clark.
Here.
Todd Helwig.
Here.
I don't see anybody else.
John is in the attendees group.
Who is?
Pull him in, John Johnson. So if you want to pull him in.
Yeah, I'm going to bring him in.
Want me to make him a panelist?
Please do.
Sure. John Johnson. Okay.
John Johnson.
Both the panelists. You got it. All right. John just needs to accept. I've asked him to be panel. Okay. Rejoin the webinar as a panelist. All right.
Welcome, John.
Present.
Okay, very good.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties over here.
Technical difficulties. Now, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Vincent Vignali.
Yes, here.
Vignali, sorry. Dana Volke.
Present.
Very good, thank you. Some ground rules for presenters and/or applicants on the agenda. The chair will invite each speaker or applicant on the agenda by name to make a presentation and speak to their application. Participants will provide their full name and hold until their name is called. Each speaker will be asked to mute their phone or computer when not speaking and to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. Those responding will be asked to wait till the floor is yielded to them by the chair. Speakers who wish to respond to the comments of others do so through the chair, taking care to identify themselves. Each vote taken by the commission will be conducted by a roll call vote. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. By phone, dial *9 to raise your hand and wait to be recognized. Please note that part of your phone number will be visible to those viewing the meeting. By Zoom, click Raise Hand on the bottom of your screen and wait to be recognized. The chair will ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all public commentators, I will call each by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. Reminder, that this meeting is being recorded and will be available for the viewing via the Northborough Remote Meetings tab on the town's website. And Vinny, we have no notice to read today, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
How'd you get into the wrong room? Was it just kind of like a...
I believe it went to, I clicked on the link and it brought me to the wrong place. I'm going to have to review the document again.
It's okay. We've recovered. Meeting minutes from February. Very concise minutes as usual. Good job, Vinny.
Thank you. Brenda and I worked on those a little bit.
I know it's a team effort.
It is.
Any questions or concerns, comments on meeting minutes?
No.
Nope.
Everybody seems okay? And we need a motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call. Dan Clark.
Yes.
Todd Helwig.
Yes.
John Johnson.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Hmm.
All right. Vinny, is Laurie going to join us at a certain time? She's on.
Laurie's in the attendees, Laurie
Okay.
and Jonathan Eichman, the town council.
Okay, let's deal with this with our first one here, then we'll roll over to that. How's that?
Sure.
3711 Reservoir Street. They want to continue to April 14th without testimony.
Yes,
Are they
they're
making
still,
progress are they getting closer, Vinny?
they are. They're working on some just final tweaks to the drainage and some erosion and sediment control stuff, but we are making progress.
Okay, all right. So we need a motion to continue the meeting for 3711 Reservoir to the April 14th meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second
Second,
by Dan. Roll call. Dan Clark,
yes.
Todd Helwig,
Yes.
John Johnson.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Continued. Okay, let's see. We want to bring in Laurie.
Go for you.
Laurie Connors and Jonathan Eichman.
You want me just to ask them to talk, or do you want them as panelists?
Let's bring them both in as
All right.
panelists.
You got
Laurie's
it.
Laurie's gonna share a screen probably.
All right, very good.
Hello, Laurie.
Good evening. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for hearing us.
course.
Attorney Eichman has joined me as well.
Hey, Jonathan.
You may recall on this first issue relative to 201 Bartlett Street, I came to speak with you several months ago, I believe it was summertime, about conservation restriction possibility. And you had some follow-up questions for me, which I kicked over to John Eichman and supplied a response, but I wasn't sure if you had any additional questions regarding the conservation restrictions. So I thought I would be proactive and ask John to join us so that he could answer those those questions you might have.
Good.
So I can share the plan. Actually, it's not showing up in my view for some reason. Interesting.
Laurie, are you trying to share your screen?
I was trying to share my screen and I have it on my computer, but it's not showing up as one of the options here, which is
Oh,
curious.
I may have to promote you to co-host.
Okay.
So let me go ahead and do that for you real quick. Once that happens, you should be able to see that share icon on the bottom of your screen.
Okay, yeah, I can see the share icon, but oh, maybe. No. For some reason, I can't see the PDFs that I have open on my screen. I don't know why that would be.
You did share your screen for 2 seconds. If you just bring those up, if you find them, that should do the trick.
Yeah, it's not available to me as an option, what I'm trying to share. I guess is my point. Okay, Danny, I'm gonna leave it to you.
Here we go.
Okay, there you go. So this is, you may recall, you folks also approved a site plan for this property. It's 150,000 square foot warehouse that was approved about 1.5 years ago. An alternative design that they submitted, largely because I believe they were interested in freezing zoning, was a subdivision design. So that was initially denied by the planning board. We did ultimately approve it through remand in December of this past year. So the conservation restriction would apply to open space parcel R1 and open space parcel R2. So essentially the conservation restriction would say that they can't do any building on those two parcels. The only thing that they can do is passive recreation. And we did have a condition within both our definitive subdivision approval as well as our site plan approval for the warehouse development, that they would be allowed to construct a bypass trail within the open space parcel R1 if the MWRA did not allow some modifications in grading through the aqueduct. They would better enable walking over the new roadway or driveway that they're proposing to construct. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have, or John.
You
Laura,
remember,
sorry.
I can't remember why I disliked this so much, but there were reasons.
I'm trying to remember myself. What,
Todd, I think part of it was, I think you were concerned with maybe some potential lack of public access.
Well, I remember that before we had gotten the text of the actual restriction. And I
Yes.
remember my concerns were sort of tied to the text of the restriction, that they were not really doing what they said they were going to do, or something along those lines.
If I remember correctly, your questions had to do with, you at first you wanted to own the properties in fee. And that was, that question was kicked back to the applicant's attorneys, and they were not interested in giving the land to the town. John, you might want to expand on that.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good, thank you. Just to expand on Lori's comments a little bit, I think it's important to remember that this donation of a conservation restriction was put in place as a result of settlement negotiations between the planning board and the developer and the property owner here to settle litigation when the developer appealed the planning board's denial of the subdivision plan. And so because of that, we were not, as it were, able to simply dictate the terms of what restriction would be given to us. The planning board wanted this restriction because they wanted a buffer between Bartlett Street and the development of the parcel upland. And this was negotiated with the developer. It's a condition of the settlement agreement that was signed by both sides, that was approved by both the select board and the planning board, that allowed settlement of this litigation. The development ultimately obtained the permits that they were required to get for this development. They haven't moved forward yet. One of the conditions of that settlement agreement is that they grant us a restriction on those two parcels shown on that plan. They provided the language of this particular restriction. We looked at this. We made some suggestions. It is consistent with the settlement agreement. If you've seen conservation restrictions in the past, this will look fairly bare bones. The state, as you may be aware, uses a form that's much more extensive. It is not required that a conservation restriction be approved by the state, and this one would not be. This would be simply one that's held by the town. We proposed that the Conservation Commission would accept this, and by the way, that's not required, because the commission has independent authority under its statutory provisions, Chapter 48C, to do this without actually going to town meeting. You can accept grants of land, conservation restrictions for conservation purposes. It made sense to us that this was a more efficient way to finalize these provisions of the settlement agreement. That's why it's being proposed this way. The access point that you raised, it's true, there is no guaranteed public access here, other than if they build that particular trail to get around the access road. If that's required by MWRA, there will be an easement to the town for that. But the purpose of this again was for the planning board to provide a buffer, a vegetative buffer, an open space buffer, as it were, between the street and the development. And that's essentially what this restriction provides for. Again, we didn't have a lot of control over what this did. It, you know, has probably not a tremendous amount of so-called conservation value for the town in terms of protecting other areas or providing access, but it will do what the planning board intended it to do. So I'm happy to address, you know, further concerns about this, but again, we're a little restricted on what we can do at this point.
Well, we don't have it. I mean, my recollection, and again, this sounds familiar, but the only reason I would even care about this would be for the maintenance of the aqueduct trail that goes through. That there was no chance that that was going to be disturbed by anything we were doing. And there was something in there that was inconsistent or unclear or vague. And I'm happy to revisit what those were, but right now you're just telling me to take it. And I don't have the text of the restriction in front of me that you're wanting us to impose.
Lori, wasn't that draft restriction passed on to the commission?
Yeah, I
Yes.
believe that it was in your reading materials for this meeting.
Oh, was it?
In the
Okay.
Dropbox file.
Yeah, it's in the Dropbox.
I may be able to pull that document up. It looked like some of my Word documents were visible, Vinny, if you
Okay.
wanna.
That's one of the
Okay.
things too, for this, again, and if you did it, then that's on me, but it doesn't matter for this purposes, but I can't open Dropbox thing because I'm prohibited from doing it for security reason. All right, let's
I
see.
actually,
This is the open space restriction. And let's see.
I have a quick question, actually a couple questions. I did read through this quickly. So it seems I'm a little confused because in one spot it says the following acts are permitted and it says passive recreational use. But then you go down further and it says it retains its right to prohibit access to the open space by the general public. But then it references this condition T of the special permit. I'm not sure what that meant either. So is it allowed or not allowed?
So condition T, I can read that to you if you like, but condition T in the planning board's decision is the bit about, it says, should the MWRA not approve the construction of the slope within the aqueduct right-of-way as identified in condition E1-2, or if the applicant desires to proceed in an alternative manner, then prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the building, the applicant shall depict on a plan the location of a 6-foot wide bypass trail on a portion of the property shown on Assessor's Map 66, Parcel 16, that is parallel to the aqueduct. Construct said 6-foot wide bypass trail and provide a grant of easement to the town for such bypass trail to the planning director and the town engineer for review and approval. The plan and easement agreement shall be submitted at least 60 days prior to the request for a certificate of occupancy, and the town shall provide any comments to the easement agreement within 30 days of receipt. The easement agreement will detail the location and the obligations and liability of the town of Northborough for regular repair and maintenance for the bypass trail. The applicant shall confer and cooperate with the planning director and town engineer for the purpose of reaching agreement on the terms of the easement agreement. Upon agreement of the form of the easement agreement by the applicant and the town, the applicant shall provide a fully executed easement agreement for recording by the town. Notwithstanding, the applicant shall be deemed to have complied with the provisions of this condition upon construction and preparation and delivery to the planning director of the plan of the bypass trail and a commercially reasonable easement agreement consistent with this paragraph and reasonable conferral as provided for herein. So similar language to that. So this is the language that is in the site plan approval for the warehouse. Similar language is also included within the definitive plan decision.
That was a lot of words.
Yeah.
So essentially what that means is that if the bypass trail isn't needed, then there won't be any need for passive recreation on this open space, these two parcels. If, however, the bypass trail is needed, then passive recreation will be allowed within that area.
All right. I guess I don't, why would you list it as a permitted act then?
I can answer that if I may. It's listed as a permitted act here because the developer is reserving that right so that it can comply with the terms of the permits that have already been issued. The reason it's in the restriction because otherwise we would have a conflict between the restriction, which says this area cannot be used for any of these purposes, with their requirement to potentially construct this 6-foot easement in that restricted area. So they've essentially in the restriction reserved that right should they need it. If they don't need it, then the restriction will basically take effect as it reads. So yeah, and the other thing to note is passive recreation as a use that's reserved by the owner does not mean, in this context, does not mean passive recreation for the public. That's the owner's use. There is no public use reserved here other than that potential easement.
I think that sounds familiar to me, that was the issue, was that whether or not it was going to be public was going to be allowed to use the parcel.
Right.
And I think the answer was no.
That's correct. Yes.
But I guess my interpretation was that it's still going to be protected as open space. It's just not granting it access. They're not going to build or do anything in there, but so it'll stay as protected open space, but the public is not invited to go out on there.
But
That's
again,
correct. Yes.
again, and I was just trying to pull a thing up on Dropbox to another computer here, but I've not been able to do it. Because I wouldn't, if it was just, if you want us to take it, I certainly wouldn't care, right? If it was just that, if it was nothing else, but for some reason, I think we needed this for the trail. And it prohibited public access.
Lori, I'm not aware of that. Is that, I didn't know there was a trail running through here.
No, the Aqueduct Trail is within its own parcel of land. So the aqueduct is within a parcel of land that is owned by the MWRA. So the aqueduct isn't on these two pieces of land.
But if they regrade the entrance to the facility such that you can't use the parcel there, it was going to have to be moved, and it was going to be moved onto a parcel that didn't have public access.
So that letter T that I just read to you says that in the instance where the MWRA doesn't allow the grading to make it possible for people to walk over this new roadway or driveway that's going to be constructed, then the trail will be transferred onto these parcels, in which case this conservation restriction says that public access is allowed within that specific area that will be within another easement that
Can you
has not
point
yet
it?
been written.
Can you pull that up on the screen?
Yeah, this is just the plan. One thing that Lori's talking about here, that the actual aqueduct trail is not moving. What's potentially moving is the access from Bartlett Street to that trail through this corridor that's being provided here that's not going to be subject to the restriction. If that has to move, then it could potentially move onto the restricted area, but it's not going to move the aqueduct trail itself.
I just need a minute to pull up that
No.
decision.
So
no-
Jonathan, what happened in the intervening months?
The intervening months between what and what exactly?
But when we last discussed this and now, what changed?
As far as I'm concerned, nothing changed. I'm not aware of any changes. This was, so I'll give you the dates that I have. The settlement agreement was executed by the parties in August of last year. At that point, the draft restriction was simply a draft. There was no final form. Following that, the restriction was essentially assembled by the applicant and sent to us. We reviewed that. We approved it generally as to form. The planning board has seen this. What remains is for acceptance by the town so that it can be recorded. That was a process that took place over the, I guess, intervening 6-7 months. I know it's been presented earlier than this, but we've had to get it on the commission's agenda. So I don't believe there's been any delay in any parties that I'm aware of, and it hasn't been any going back and redoing things. I think it proceeded pretty much in time from the date the settlement agreement was signed in August.
Greg, a couple more questions.
Yep.
So if the Conservation Commission accepts this easement, I presume along with that becomes the responsibility to monitor the easement for compliance with the conditions of the restriction.
So the restriction itself is a restriction. The easement would be a separate piece of this. The easement would go to the town. Putting the easement aside, which may or may not come into existence, the restriction itself is, you're right, is strictly, it prevents the owner of the land from doing things. The town would have the right to enforce that. That would provide for monitoring by the town, I would assume through the commission. How the commission carries out that monitoring, at what point in time, what assets are, how they devote their time to it is entirely up to the commission. That's discretionary. There are no mandatory oversight in this restriction.
Jonathan, you mentioned earlier, I'm sorry, Dan, do you have another point? I didn't want to cut you off there.
Just one thing I noticed, T says, the MWRA approves the construction. I mean, on the plan, it says DCR owns the aqueduct, so I'm just curious if DCR has been involved in this at all.
The aqueduct is owned by the MWRA.
Not according to the plan, it's not.
The plan says, correct, it says Commonwealth of Mass, DCR Aqueduct, and it gives a book and page number. That is as far as I'm aware, that's the correct identifier for the deed to the aqueduct. Whether that, entity has perhaps changed name over time, that's possible. I don't know at this point.
No, DCR is still DCR. I don't want to get too involved because I work for DCR, so I was just pointing that out.
9, I can take a look right now. If you have questions, go ahead in the meantime. I'm just going to pull that out. The deed.
I got a quick question here. So I think you mentioned earlier that this is the end product of a lot of negotiations and so forth, and there's not much wiggle room on our end. It is what it is, what you're looking at here. If the commission should decide not to accept it, what happens then?
They're still obligated to convey it to the town, so the town would have to accept it through other avenues. Likely that would require going to town meeting for authorization to do that because there's very little independent authority in town boards or commissions to accept interest in land. So I assume that's what would happen. I haven't really discussed that process with anyone at this point.
Okay. All right, thank you. Buddy, were you reviewing the document?
I'm looking at it now, yeah.
Are there other restrictions we monitor? Greg or Vinny, do we hold other restrictions?
We do hold some other restrictions, but in terms of monitoring, I'm not aware of any monitoring, Vinny.
Yeah, we're supposed to monitor everything that we hold, but we're also talking later on in the meeting, actually, I think maybe the next item, the 0 Northgate. That's another one we're going to accept as well. So it's a similar situation. We're accepting the whole fee on that one, not a restriction, but it's generally the same idea that we're allowed to accept either restrictions or fees, which saves the trouble of having to go to town meeting.
So I guess if you're telling me that there is no way that what we're doing here is going to eliminate public use of that trail through there, then I'll sign off.
You're talking about the aqueduct trail in the aqueduct itself,
It's
correct?
the only thing it's the only thing we care about, right?
Yeah. No, this doesn't affect that. If you look at the plan, you can see that the restriction parcels border on the aqueduct parcel, but they don't intrude into the parcel.
And if they
Yeah.
change the grade of the access road, then they have to relocate the trail onto the open space parcel?
No, if they change, so the idea is that the public would be able to walk from Bartlett Street up that access road, which is fairly short, to get to the aqueduct trail. And the issue is going to be if the grade changes, then there may not be room to put basically a public access sidewalk in that piece of the access road.
Well, I'm more
Therefore,
concerned about east-west because no one's going to be walking up from Bartlett Street.
Yeah,
well,
if I
that's
can
what we're-
clarify, so the concern was that when they build up this road or the driveway, it's gonna be such a steep grade that is gonna be challenging for people to walk up the slope on one end and then walk down the slope on the other end. The concern was that people might slip and fall down the slope. So in our deliberations, the applicant's engineer had drawn up a grading plan that created a gentler grade going up and then going down the other side to facilitate pedestrians who are using the aqueduct. So the concern was that maybe the MWRA won't allow them to change the grade. So what do we do then? You know, we don't want people falling down the slope that are using the aqueduct for recreation purposes. So as a compromise, we came up with that condition T. So there we have a sketch plan that shows approximately where a bypass trail would go on their property. And they were concerned about people going out of that, like just kind of wandering off the trail. And so that's why that condition specifically speaks to an easement. So they had concerns about liability. What if somebody gets hurt? So Should that happen and the MWRA not allow the grading variations, then they consented to have this bypass trail on their property within that open space parcel R1,
And the public can use it.
and the public can use it, yes.
So that is, so there will always be access east-west on the Aqueduct Trail.
Correct. One
And you
way
all-
or the other, either through the aqueduct itself, using the regrading, or through the open space parcel R1 via bypass trail.
And you have my blessing.
Thank you. I apologize. I didn't quite understand that. I don't believe I've seen that sketch. So thank you, Lori, for clarifying. It does look like the aqueduct trail could move. But in that case, yeah, an easement has to be provided.
And there may be no impact at all if MWRA says sure.
Correct. Yes.
So, Plan B. Okay, any more questions from the commission? Dan, you okay?
Yeah, I guess just the recognition that when you accept a restriction, there are monitoring obligations typically that go along with it. So I don't know how we do that or who does that, but when I sort of want to acknowledge that that's part of this, is that, you know, making sure they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing is part of this process.
And this is a pretty easy site to do that to.
Yeah, it is.
We also have the Trails Committee does a lot of that monitoring for us. So I think that's one of the benefits we get from our Trails Committee. They monitor to make sure everything stays in a safe, good condition. So they do a lot of the monitoring, or they do the monitoring associated with the trails.
John Johnson, any questions from your side?
I'm looking at this and I'm concerned about the sloping. So when I look at the driveway and I look at the east-west sides going through the aqueduct trail, I think I'd like to see some type of topo map that denotes what the inclination is on both sides of the driveway. I'd like to see what that slope number is.
Yeah, that was the concern that was raised by the planning board, and just the idea that they have to ask for permission from MWRA. So assuming that MWRA is okay with regrading, it's just going to get regraded to a reasonable slope on both sides within the right of way or within the MWRA property. If the MWRA does not cooperate and go along with that, then they're going to have a reasonable slope going down through that parcel R1 on the west side, and then having it come back up on within the MWRA property. So either way, we're going to get the necessary slope on a walkway.
Yeah.
It's just, this is like Greg said, this is kind of the plan B, just in case it falls out with the MWRA, it gives us the option, or confirms our options as a town.
Okay. Thank you, Vinny.
Okay. So we just need to move ahead here with a vote, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Move
And
to
this-
accept the restriction.
Well, I think there's some worded, some verbiage too, isn't there, Vinny?
There is. It was in a pre-meeting memo, if someone has it, or do you want me to read it?
Go ahead and read it if you got it in front of you.
I, Todd Helwig, move to accept the declaration of restriction from the Northborough Land Realty Trust in the form presented, if that's acceptable to you, Todd.
That was really different than what I said. Sure, I will make that motion.
Thank
Is
you.
there a second?
Second.
Second by Dan. Roll call. Dan Clark,
Yes.
Todd Helwig,
Yes.
John Johnson,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Laura, you're sticking around for a bit, right?
So I will need you folks to come in and sign the acceptance. So a majority of you anyway, at your leisure.
Well, this is the majority you're looking at here tonight, so that'll do it.
If you were all in the room, then I'd get your signatures right now.
Well, that's one of my next questions coming up. We'll get to that. So, what is there a timeline for this, Laura? You want this done by a certain date?
Well, no, there isn't a specific deadline, but I know they're anxious to record the document and satisfy their requirements under the remand decision.
Okay, all right.
So preferably within the next couple of weeks, because otherwise people start to forget.
Okay. Well, I think Dan and Todd will be there anyway to get sworn in. There's an opportunity to sign that. I'll make sure I get there and get it done. And John, you can just figure out just to swing by.
I'll swing by.
And Vinny, you'll have it, right?
I will have it, yes.
Great.
Because she was not present at this meeting, do we need to remove Sadie as a signature, or do we leave her?
I'm sorry, say it again, John.
Do we leave Sadie on the document that requires the signature?
We just need 4 signatures out of the 7,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, you can leave her. That's fine. Just as long as she doesn't sign it.
Okay.
Gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate it. If I led you astray, I apologize.
You all set? You leaving us, Jonathan?
I am, I don't think I have anything else on the agenda, but I think that's it.
All right, I think we're good.
Thank you, John.
All right. Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. 0 Northgate Road, Laurie. We've already talked about it here in the commission, I think a couple of months ago.
Yes.
It's not a great piece of property. I think it's actually like a white cedar swamp or something back there.
Yes, and I'm sure that's why it would be gifted to us instead of sold to a developer. So the benefit of this parcel of land is, of course, that it is surrounded by land that you already own. So it makes sense. It's additional frontage, and it's another way to ensure you're protecting wetlands. So that's a major benefit to the town. I have been going back and forth with the property owner. Her signed deed is en route. So I anticipate getting that any day. I did go to the select board after I met with you folks a couple of months ago, and they authorized you folks to accept the land if you decided that that's something that you wanted to do. We did hire town council to prepare the deed and also to do a title certification. So the title came out clear. So we are all set to go if that's something that you folks want to do.
Good. Any questions from the commission? Comments?
So Vinny, you want it, right?
Yes, yeah, it's a good property. It's nothing fancy, but it makes sense. Because it's actually a mostly dead white cedar swamp, but that's the whole big problem on our property as well.
Any other issues? No issues? Is there certain language here too, Vinny, I think?
Yes. All right. The motion is to accept pursuant to the provisions of GL Chapter 40, Section 8C for open space and conservation purposes and subject to the protections of Article 97 of the Articles of Amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution, 0 Northgate Road, Northborough.
Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by John. Roll call. Dan Clark,
Yes.
Todd Helwig,
Yes.
John Johnson.
Yes.
I vote yes. Okay. Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Application, Lake Pierce Streetscape Improvement Project. What's that about?
Yes. All right. So last week, or maybe it was the week before, we had a community outreach workshop for the downtown streetscape project. So this is a project that's proposed for Blake and the portion of Pierce Street that goes from the intersection with Blake to what I refer to as the War Memorial Park. So what this proposal is to pretty much redo this little pocket park where the Christmas tree stands, the Christmas
Mhm.
tree would stay. Reconfigure and redo the municipal parking lot that's associated with 4 West Main Street. Add a sidewalk where one currently does not exist on the east side of Blake Street. Redo the existing sidewalk with concrete and vertical granite curb. Unfortunately, we are constrained within the limits of the right-of-way, so we have to do these little bump outs where the existing telephone poles exist to preserve them, because we also want to add some on-street parking. So we're looking for ways to add the supply of public parking within the project area. Then we're interested in building a new sidewalk. Currently, the sidewalk on Pierce Street dead ends at this intersection with Blake. So we would like to continue the sidewalk, like I said, on the east side of Blake, and then go all the way down to the War Memorial Park. So this would be a sidewalk over the existing railroad tracks. And we want to add a bunch of landscaping. We really want to beautify it. Here are some renderings that show what these improvements would entail. So we want to add some beautiful new landscaping to define the street edge. We want to redo the flagpole area with some a seating wall, put up some fencing to prevent folks from cutting through over the railroad tracks from Cumberland Farms. We're interested in doing a pergola, some decorative street lighting, seating under the pergola. You can see there the decorative street lighting would have banner hardware. You can see the improved sidewalk. Improved, this is the existing crosswalk. We would be interested in adding some additional crosswalks for safety. As you can see, some attractive furniture. Here's an image of the pergola. Some porous pavers underneath. Some additional images. This is the view from the Pierce Street looking towards Route 20. Some additional images. And then at the workshop, we asked the attendees to give some preferences as far as the seating wall is concerned, the benches, the bike racks, the trash barrels, the type of lighting they liked, the fencing, and the pergola. So we had approximately 50 attendees, and we took that information. The Beta Group is our consultant, and we have a focus group that consists of staff, myself and the DPW director, as well as representatives from various boards and committees, and some downtown property owners. So we've taken that feedback, and they're going to be updating the plans to take into account what people's preferences are, and we're advancing to through the design process, and hopefully, if we're able to secure funding, going out to bid in the winter time and starting construction in April of next year. So this project isn't going to be cheap. It's estimated to be about $2.1 million. So I did put a warrant article in requesting $1.85 million. And of course, I had some mixed comments from Appropriations and the Financial Planning Committee. So I'm doing what I can to offset the municipal burden by pursuing grants. And one of the grants that I'm interested in pursuing is called a Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant. And what they like to do is fund projects that have climate change measures incorporated into them to make the town more reliant. And so this project, I think, would be a good fit for that grant for a few different reasons. Number one, we're trying to expand the sidewalk network because we are interested in having people walk more downtown instead of constantly relying on automobiles to get from here to there. We're also incorporating a number of street trees. In the center here of this municipal parking lot, we're proposing to put a bioswale, which will capture the runoff from the parking lot. So the parking lot would be super elevated to direct all of the stormwater flow into this, this bioswale. Currently, there is no drainage at all within the municipal parking lot. So this would be a big improvement. We do have some problems with puddling here and there. So we would, like I said, be making some improvements to this pocket park using porous pavers. And we are adding some additional trees over by the War Memorial Park parking lot. So we thought that this would be a good fit. And of course, this is just a preliminary design. So I'm hopeful that we will be adding some additional green infrastructure features as the design advances. But I kind of wanted to present this to you. And of course, I don't have to explain to you the benefits of the low impact design as far as cleansing stormwater flow and infiltrating stormwater into the ground, as well as cleansing contaminants. So I thought that this might be something that you folks would be willing to support. And hopefully that would translate into a support letter for my MVP grant, which is due on April 4th.
Okay. Well, how much is the grant, Lori?
Well, I'm still trying to figure that out. We have been talking with the property owner of 10 and 14 Blake Street, and they are interested in making some improvements that would echo what we're proposing to do in the municipal parking lot. And this grant does allow improvements on private property. So if they are interested in partnering with us on this grant and having their landscaping improvements paid for by the grant, then we would have to price out what this would cost. And I'm not exactly sure. I was thinking if it was just going to be a municipal project, that I would ask for around $750,000. If they are interested in partnering with us, then I was thinking of asking for $1 million.
Okay.
So that would be a significant chunk. And I am also applying for a Complete Streets Action Grant. And that grant, the maximum amount that we're eligible for is $500,000. So I'm planning on asking for $500,000. So that would be a big chunk.
Sure.
So this would really reduce the cost to the town significantly by about half.
Mm-hmm. All right, good, thank you. Questions, comments?
It ain't gonna get better unless we spend some money.
Anybody else? Okay.
I had just one. I just,
ahead, John.
Laurie, in all the crosswalks that were going to be put in there, Are those all gonna be just regular straight through crosswalks, or was there gonna be a crosswalk light in any of those areas?
We have been talking about that, particularly this location right here. We were talking about maybe adding like a flashing pedestrian sign.
Yes.
So that hasn't been decided definitively, but is that one of your requests? Because I'd be happy to pass that along.
Not a request, but I think it's a nice to have.
Okay, great. I will definitely share your feedback.
Anything else? Okay. We should take a quick vote on this one. Looking to need a motion to provide a letter of support for the MVP grant.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call. Dan Clark,
You're on mute, Dan.
you're muted.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Todd Helwig,
Yes.
John Johnson.
Yes.
Okay, I vote yes.
Thank you very much for your support. I appreciate it.
Okay. You
Have a
put a
good
letter
night.
together and I'll come in and sign it. We'll go from there. Don't run away yet. I got a question for you.
Oh, sure, sure.
The remote meeting policy,
Hmm.
it expires, I believe, sometime late this month. What's going on? Have you heard? What are our other boards and committees doing, and what do you hear?
Well, a lot of the boards and committees are already in the hybrid mode. The planning board is like you. So the planning board meets 100% remote. So we're on standby. There has been a bill presented to extend the remote meetings permanently, but it hasn't been approved yet. So in the past, it's been very last minute. So I anticipate that it'll be very last minute again. But as a safeguard, you may want to anticipate that your next meeting may be in person.
Okay. All right.
In
Very
which case I'd be happy to show Vinny how to operate. Well, actually, have you already done a meeting in that room? No.
No.
Be happy to show you, and I'm sure Dana is the expert, so we can get you folks all familiar with how to do it in that room.
We'll get you hooked up over there, and we just did a big build out over at the large meeting room in the library too, that we just wrapped up today,
You're
which we're going to
talking
be
for-
using
for
for hybrid
hybrid.
meetings too.
That's for hybrid, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we could also just go totally in person. Right? Be there,
That
be
is-
square. So
That is absolutely an option.
yeah.
The select board is hoping to have all meetings hybrid shortly. So that's the plan.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you very much.
All right. So Vinny, we should plan for April to be in conference room B.
I'm not sure that one, Dana, is conference room B set up for hybrid, or is it just the select board office?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Oh, so we could do on the
It's
same night as the select
significantly
board.
more basic, but it's doable.
All right. Good with basic.
Okay. All right. We now are going to talk about electric bike use on conservation land. And I believe that is Mr. Belfer. Brian, I'm going to bring you in as a panelist. Here he is. Hey, Brian.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
The document here. All right. The item here is electrical bikes in conservation land. Consider allowing use of Class 1 e-bikes on Northborough Con land where currently no motorized vehicles are allowed. correct, Vinny?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Can you just what is a class 1 versus class 2 versus class 3 e-bike, Brian?
Oh, I should have had my documents ready. I can tell you that a class 1 is a pedal assist only, no throttle, and it has a speed limitation on it. And then it goes north from there. I think I may have included a link to those in the letter I wrote, but
Yes, you did.
Are the
Those are on
majority of the bikes that I would see around on every day class 1s?
well, I'm not sure where you would see them around. If you're seeing bikes out on the street
Yeah.
and oftentimes on rail trails, those might be class 2. By far, the vast majority of bikes you'll see on trails, or the ones that we want to allow, would be class 1.
All right. Vinny did some research here, and apparently the state law says no motorized vehicles are allowed on trails.
Without local
Without-
regulations allowing it, yes.
Correct.
Yeah, I got that from Brian, actually, so I don't want
Okay.
to take the credit. Pulling
Yeah,
up,
and DCR has moved to allowing, I believe, class 1 on what they consider their improved surfaces. Dan can probably clarify that.
Yeah, like rail trails, we do, but not sort of natural surface trails. We don't allow them.
so I'm pulling up what I got from, not exactly sure where, e-bike mass or something like that.
There's several, sources out there for either advocacy or information collecting, or folks generally upset with whatever the rules might be at the time.
So,
That's how regulation usually works. But so this is from e-bikes in Mass. E-bikes Mass is the site. It describes and this was in your Dropbox folder for the pre-meeting information. Talks about the bicycles, the class 1s, but then it talks about the allowances. They're allowed on not allowed on sidewalks, and not allowed on natural surface trails, unless specifically allowed by the local jurisdiction, which is what we're talking about here. So now what I'm encouraging is discussion. Do you want to consider that? Because if to allow it on the trails in town, there has to be a public hearing. So I have to notice that, just like we do with the legal ads.
Yep.
And hold a public hearing, and we can have all the discussion, get feedback from the public, and then you guys make a decision. So if that's something we want to do, we want to kind of talk about the background here, but we can't actually make the decision tonight because it's not a noticed public hearing.
Right. Okay.
so Brian, you're the one out there seeing this in the real world. I mean, what do you think? What do you want?
Well, so for the most part, the whole industry is moving forward at such a rapid pace that all the legislation is all behind. So I'm going to exaggerate, but effectively hundreds of aging mountain bikers a day are converting over to class 1 e-bikes. You see them on every ride. They're on every trail. They're already on our town trails. And, from 10 feet away, you can't even tell the difference. And effectively riding them, they have, they don't impact the trail like a gas powered dirt bike does. A lot of the rules and regs that have come up in the last few years, again, they've been behind the industry trends in general and the consumer trends in general. So everyone's really playing catch up at this point. And then what we found from the mountain bike side is the more restrictive the rules are, the more there's just more people breaking the rules on purpose or inadvertently. It's an enforcement nightmare. The whole idea of the no motorized vehicles predated e-bikes, existing. So it's a bit of a challenge all around.
Right, Brian, do the e-bikes do they provide more impact to the trails than a manually powered bike?
Class 1 e-bikes do not. impact the trails any greater than a pedal bike. Throttle powered bikes most definitely do, and that
Right.
is something that people in trail systems are struggling with as more folks are out on class 1. What used to be effectively kids on motocross brappy dirt bikes are now riding throttle e-bikes.
And like you said, it's an enforcement nightmare, right? So.
It is, and I mean, there are again, within this town, you'll find folks who are of fine repute. They're not aggravated teenagers who are pedaling their class 1 e-bikes. I only don't have one yet because they're just really expensive. So.
Well, the class 1 is pedal assist.
Pedal assist,
So
correct.
you have to be pedaling. It's not like a
Mhm.
dirt bike where you can just sit there and give it the throttle and go.
And I think when this sort of topic came up for discussion, it wasn't so much that I actually wasn't aware you had to make a whole public meeting about it. I think it was just I was asked what our opinions on it were, and my opinion and the committee's opinion is that generally speaking around town, class 1 e-bikes are just fine. Doesn't mean we're going to put up giant signs saying, please come ride them, but that the idea where there's federal laws and state laws and then town laws can override it just presents big challenges all around. Or regulations, I guess. Not sure.
Yes.
Well, I
We had
think
this
it's
on
in
our
our-
agenda.
In our
Sorry.
town bylaw too, Vinny, right?
Well, you have a policy, the town conservation area policy says no motorized vehicles. So that's why we have to, if we are going to allow, which is what it sounded like at a previous meeting when we asked for, like Brian was saying, we asked for feedback and thoughts. And I was under the impression that all we needed was to agree that that's what was going to happen. I did a little more digging and it says that we need to actually act. So, so I'm happy to put it on an agenda for an upcoming meeting and have it formally decided. But if we know going into it that you're not even interested in entertaining it, I won't go through the trouble of advertising it. But I just wanted to get that lead in there. But it seems like people are in support of the idea.
Yeah. Anybody have any issue? Dan, Todd, John?
I think maybe we should get one on our budget so that the Chair Trails Committee can have one for his use.
Or the agent, yeah.
Or the agent, that's right.
That's after our. That's
We don't
after
ask for much.
Todd, that's going to after our flamethrower drone we're going to get.
Good.
I'm just a little concerned how this is going to be monitored and I'll use the word, no pun intended, policed. So how does this, we start with the bikes and then what helps us make sure we stay within class 1 and we don't get to class 2 or class 3? How do we enforce just class 1? And what would that signage look like if you were going to put something up around our trailheads on the conservation land? A couple of topics of concern.
Well,
Those are good questions. I
from
think
my perspective would be the Trails Committee. They're the
Yeah.
ones that are out there every day. If they see they see class 3 bike or something ripping it up, I would expect they would approach the operator and say, cut it out.
right. And then I think that we would have to prepare, like John said, a sign, and it would have to be clear to allow to help the Trails Committee actually notice the enforcement and other people walking to know a little bit of what the differences are. And then it would be my action as well as policing action to take when it comes to real enforcement. It's not something that a couple of citizens on the Trails Committee can do. There
Right.
could be difficult conflicts.
Unless they knew them.
Yeah, interpersonal is always the best way. If you know them, you say, okay, well, we allowed e-bikes, the class 1s, and if we get people coming in and ripping the place up with the class 2s, you may lose the right to use the class 1s. So you have the people kind of protect their rights up to the point that they get. Otherwise, they could lose their rights.
Would we exclude any trails? Or would we start and allow it on several and then see how that goes and then expand, or broad brush it to start?
Brian, can you give feedback on that? I mean, that's a possibility of the way to start. How do you see that might work?
I'm not sure how you would decide which trails would be okay and which ones wouldn't. I mean, the pretty much everything in town currently, outside of some of the SVT managed stuff, is pedalable by mountain bike, and it's very popular. So I'm not really sure how one would decide if you only wanted to do limited parcels.
Well,
Is
I
there,
would put a sign up at the trailhead saying, but powered bikes not allowed. And include something in our webpage of what trails yes and what trails no. That's about a passive approach to it. Or maybe it might be more hassle than it's worth too. So
I mean, if a trail allows bikes, I don't see the distinction between a class 1 and a regular bike. They're both, it's just helping people pedal. They're pedaling anyway. So in terms of trail damage, I don't know how you would, can't imagine there's any distinction between the two. If the trail's not supposed to be where it is, it wouldn't matter if it's a regular bike or a motorized bike. It's the trail.
Okay.
That's
Good
not
point.
my opinion. That's
points. All right. So if we want to go ahead and move forward, we would want to take a quick vote, and then we would want to put on the agenda for April, Vinny.
I can do that. I'm not sure we could do a vote, or we could just, I mean, I think everybody's in agreement unless you want to say that you're not, and then I can put it on the agenda so we get the full 7 members for all their comments at a public hearing at our next meeting.
I mean, I'm fine with moving ahead. My view. John, any issues on your side, or Dan?
No, I'm okay with class 1 as long as we post signs.
Okay.
I have no issues.
Todd, you okay?
Yep.
Okay. Then we'll move ahead that way. Put in the
I will.
agenda for April 14th, I believe.
Yes.
That may be an in-person meeting, Brian, as you probably heard, or we'll see how it goes. All right. All right. No COCs, right?
That's correct.
No violations to talk about.
Nope.
Whitney Street, 432 Whitney Street, discuss potential uses and activities. This is kind of a carryover from last month on that side. I think we had talked about a couple things. One is we need to see a trail being laid out at some point in time. And I know from my standpoint, I want to walk the site and get a feel of it before I look at a trail on that piece. The concerns that were mentioned, there were several concerns mentioned before, including the trail stub being a question to DCR property without a DCR trail approval. The actual location next to the slopes, further away the better, from my view. There were some concerns I think Kelly had about parallel trails, with one being on the other side of the railroad tracks. Anything else? Oh, the idea about, do we allow hunting or not, or do we allow anything at all and just leave it open? All those discussions are on the table.
Yes. And just to correct the last one that you raised, because
Yep.
I gave incorrect information at the last meeting. I did some more research into the hunting policy in town that was created. I think, I forget the date of the hunting policy, but It specifically says hunting is prohibited on all town conservation areas except Mount Pisgah. So it wasn't, it's allowed on new sites as well as Mount Pisgah, but it actually prohibits it everywhere except Mount Pisgah. So my guidance and direction from the last meeting to say that it could be this 432 Whitney could be a site where there is hunting allowed is not correct. So there could not be hunting on this site.
Would not say we want to do that, but just as an aside, if we wanted to open hunting up for a piece of property, how could we do that? Could we do that? And if so, how?
You just changed the town policy. You
Town
are
meeting
the
vote required?
we would need to hold a public hearing. So we'd have to advertise it, just like
Yep.
we're going to do with the change to the
Right.
e-bikes. So it's public hearing, get comments, and then the commission makes the decision.
But not a town meeting vote.
No, just the commission. It's a policy.
All right. Just curious.
At some point, I'd love to discuss that policy, particularly with Vinnie's recent information. Maybe it's some agenda item in the future.
From what perspective, Dan? We'll do it, but just.
I think it's well, big picture, I think it's a mistake to prohibit hunting on these
Okay.
parcels. I think we ought to reconsider that.
Okay.
So
then
if I may, I agree completely. I think that, you know, the fact that we want to put a trail somewhere and that it sort of inadvertently causes a hunting exclusion is not at all like our intent. I'd love to find a better way around town where we can all, you know, partake in the activities.
Yeah,
So
I
let's
think.
let's put that on the agenda as a future item. That's a discussion item in itself.
Okay, yeah, I think these are compatible. All types of recreation can be compatible if they're approached the right way, so.
I can do that too.
I did have a question about the Whitney. I went through that packet.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
And I guess I'm curious because there are 4 or 5 different iterations of the trail. I'm not sure which one is the proposed one.
There was a outline sketch that Marielle proposed, and there was only in the packet there was a slide presentation and a PDF version that I believe was sent over.
Yes.
And there was only, I believe, one trail. There was some GPS tracks just from some exploratory walks, but I think the one that Vinnie presented at the last meeting, I did watch and look at the notes. I think that's pretty close to the goal.
The loop you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are other ones in that Dropbox that showed different.
Yes. So this was, and I could pull up the other ones. They're in the Dropbox. I'd have to go dig them out while you guys discuss. But this was one that I prepared that incorporated generally the idea. I had a first draft of one trail kind of coming through, maybe zigzagging through here, going out, and then out looping out into the DCR property. So that was the first one I gave as an option. We got a response back from the Trails Committee with where they walked. So there was actually a path of a couple of trails in here, or tracks of where they walked when they were out on the site in December. So that showed a track map of kind of coming down through here, coming around, doing something out in here, and then coming back up in this area here. So there was another track that looked like another trail. And then there was a third one that was Marielle and the Trails Committee's suggestion of having the trail come in just like this, kind of following this same line. But instead of going into a single pass across the wetlands, I recommended, instead of having it go down here and looping around and then coming back and going along this steep slope, I changed it to being just a loop in the stable areas with a connection off to the wetlands. So there were 3 or 4 different graphics showing a path or a track going through the woods. But this was the one that I recommended as being the priority. And I think, Brian, that's the one that we had at the last meeting, correct?
Yeah, the one on your screen now is the one that you guys discussed last time. And just sort of to loop back, you know, whatever. And I apologize too for the lack of representation at the last meeting. The meeting prior, we were asked to come up with a preliminary proposal for what a trail could look like, which is what we did. What's on the screen is not necessarily a final version. It's just here's an idea for consideration of something that resembles what we'd like to do. Obviously, we all need to get out there and look at it, and then we'd have to flag it. So I think we were just looking for general approval that a trail of some kind resembling this is suitable for the parcel. There was one point that I would like to address from the last meeting, and that's the importance of that little spur. There was some notable commentary that we shouldn't do that, or that certain members of the committee said that they didn't feel that that was necessary because there was no existing trails on the other side where DCR land is. And I just want to point out that it's super important for us to establish a pathway right up to the border, because otherwise the landowner on the other side could say, well, there's no connection, so why should we bother allowing trails here at all? So being able to get folks right up to where we someday in the future, even if it's years forward, where we might have further access, is it's a pretty important component. Not a make or break, but it's a pretty high value.
And that part is understandable, and that's why, as Brian said, we didn't have any representation here, and I didn't have that response from the Trails Committee. So the idea of having that stub does make sense in that aspect, but it also is a spot where we have 3 kind of narrow wetland crossings. These are not extensive swampy areas. These are kind of ditches through the woods, streams, intermittent streams that come down. There's one that's a little larger, which comes out of a pipe that's here. And I think there's another pipe that's over here. So they do have flow. We have to incorporate them in the design when we start talking about where the trail is going to go. But again, I think, as Greg said in the beginning of this, we want to see a kind of a flagged area first, similar to what we're going to do over at Edmund Hill, flag the area, then walk the area, and then have the formal vote of accepting or not accepting.
Is the waterway there, if any, in need of a bridge on those trails?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We're not talking a 15, 20-foot bridge. It's more just a 6-foot or an 8-foot passage.
The hydrology is there that requires that type of assisted crossing, right?
Yeah, it would just make a mess of the trail. So it's
Yeah.
better to, I think everybody, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I think everybody would benefit from having a bridge there instead of it just being a ford and you just slosh through it. It's not, doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. We totally want to be up out of the wet zones as much as possible. And I don't know if folks have been out much, but we've moved towards using, helical piles in wetlands and wetland adjacent areas, similar to the way SVT crosses full swamps and other state, bridges and boardwalks go right through water. The benefit of those is that they're the ones we do, they're hand installed, so there's really minimal disturbance to the dirt and soil, and then the bridge is up above, and the water can keep flowing nicely. So it's we've kind of upped our game as far as bridge design and construction to be able to allow people to get across stuff without messing up the terrain.
Brian, do you use those on Pisgah?
We use them at the Lyman Road entrance.
Yep. Okay.
Howard Street in Northborough, Lyman and
sorry, the
yes.
235 Lyman, Berlin, the Howard Street parcel.
Right. Okay.
And I think there was another clarification you were going to make, Brian. There was a question that came up.
There's just some feedback from the previous meeting there. It's sort of been I think Kelly may have mentioned that we're sort of asking the question of why do we need trails here if there's, trails on the aqueduct? And I just wanted to stress that the aqueduct is the connector, right? That's like the straightaway walk path that gets you from through town and to Edmund Hill and to Pisgah, and then it would also get you to this parcel as well. So the existence of that aqueduct trail really ought not to be seen as, oh, there's already trails near here. Like, that's the connector road. Maybe someday it'll be a rail trail. But being able to have the trails on the parcel that has all kinds of cool, scenic views and cool wildlife is, they're not really, they're two different things. And
And I think the parallel trails idea was so you're not impacting the conservation area as much with multiple trails over the same general area. This is two separate things because one is on one side of the railroad line and the other it's on the other side, and you can't cross the rail line. I mean, safely or legally. So we need to cross up at Whitney Street. So even though they're quote parallel, they're not really connected, and they're not connected all along. They're connected at Whitney.
So have we scheduled a site visit or should we?
We will, yeah. We haven't yet. We will. I was thinking, I don't know, I talked to Vinny today about it. April vacation would maybe, I know some of the commissioners that normally couldn't make it because of issues may be able to make it, but that might be a bad time, two folks going away or whatever, but. We will
Is
schedule a
that
site
something
visit
that
for sure.
we would do an inspection, but I think it would be nice to have a few flags up there, or at least have me aware of where the trail, I could run the walk to follow the trail that I've got laid out here. But if there's some interest or some push to get onto some of the more steep slopes and there's good reason to have that, it would be good to get the trails committee's feedback and say, I mean, keeping it up at the top seems to make sense to keep it off the steep slopes. But if there is, and I think there was in Marielle's presentation, a nice picture of a beaver dam, a beaver lodge. I mean, not a beaver dam, a beaver lodge and a beaver pond. If that's down in this area here, might make sense to have a spur that goes down and then comes back up. So there are reasons to go up and down steep slopes that are feasible and safe and stable, but running the full line across the trail across that full steep slope it could be problematic. So those are the kind of things we'd look for if we were going out and looking at a trail layout for approval, to see where you want to get down to the wetland areas, how you're going to cross the wetland areas, and where are the lookout points? What are the points of interest? That kind of stuff. Is that something that you could kind of put together for us, Brian, or you and I can kind of put together before the whole commission gets out there?
I think we could get some flags in the ground showing, notating, if not the entire thing, but certainly notating some like key vantage points. Yeah, absolutely. Now that the weather has turned and we have some after work light hours.
Yeah.
And is that something that could be done so it could be ready for April vacation week, whatever that is, the 15th, or I'm not sure when it is.
We can most certainly target that, and then we'll be able to update as soon as we can.
Your Mother Nature needs to be a partner in this whole thing, so you don't know.
Yes, I mean it's great right now, but who knows? But yes, I think it's a feasible target.
One thing from my view, is that the further, I really don't want to see a trail down that slope. The thing, remember this area here, you're probably talking 10 to 15 feet of fill of leaves and foodstuffs and so forth. That's your base. Not real stable.
Right.
So just keep in mind that my view, we want to keep away from that edge. So.
Yeah, and I don't know that they had any real interest in that portion. It's this area back here, which is old fill, but it's still fill. A lot of the top got kind of pushed over the edge, so it's not a neat old growth slope. So it needs some work. So that's why it's good to get out there and see it in the field.
Any more questions, comments? Todd, anything from your side?
I'm good.
Dan, you're good?
Yeah.
John? John Johnson?
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. It's an informal discussion, so there's no need to take a vote here, but we just got a plan going forward. So. All right. Anything else before you leave, Ryan? Anything else you want to bring up?
No, I think we're good. Thanks for all the time and consideration. We appreciate it.
You've got also, don't forget Ebony Hill, right? Similar thing going on there with Vinny and you and marking stuff off. And
absolutely. I've been just a little bit behind schedule, but now that the snow is melted and we've got some oftentimes my work gets done after work, but before it gets dark during the week. So I will be getting right back on that. So you should see some flags sprouting up at Edmund Hill very shortly.
There we go, sprouting up. All right, good deal.
Before you go, Brian, I think I have one more for, where is that? 0 Northgate, Whitney. The Hop Brook area. No, that's the wrong. I don't have it. The next item agenda, the Hop Brook Dam repair and Shrewsbury Sewer bypass project. Thought I had them overall. There it is.
This is an FYI video, right? An update?
Yeah, this is just an FYI. They're preparing for submittal. Big file. And this is not a real clear map, but I will kind of zoom in and kind of walk you through it. But it's a proposal, and they're going to be coming in with a notice of intent for doing some work. This area here is, so big picture, this is West Main Street along there. And then down here is Route 20 Southwest Cutoff. Or no, sorry, this is the Southwest Cutoff, Route 20 Southwest Cutoff. It goes down by Kimball Sand. This is the access road going up to the Shops Way. So this is that area where we have going to be starting soon. The commission just permitted the cleanup of the hazmat remediation in that site. They're also coming in with some work to repair and rehab the dam. So I'm zooming in a bit. Try to get to the right spot. So in this view, actually slide down a little. In this view, you can kind of see where the trees are missing. That's the dam. And this is the section that runs parallel to Route 20. This is Tomlin Hill Road. So what they're proposing to do is, this red line is kind of their limit of work. The dam itself at Hop Brook had a little settlement. So this area here is a little bit lower than it needs to be. So they need to build that up and reshape the dam and kind of bring it up to the standard. And that's what they're going to be proposing to do. And they're going to have, this is the Davis Street property, or the Davis Street end of it, where they're going to have a little construction entrance and access to do the work all along this here, running parallel to Route 20. This is another construction access. That's where the remediation project is going to be centered. They're going to have access there to go in and do some remediation work in here.
Is that where the gate is now, Vinny?
Yes, the gate is kind of right here. And as part of this project, their dam work is going through, is an existing sewer line, underground sewer line coming from Shrewsbury that feeds down to Tomlin and then travels across, I think, to Marlborough. But that is currently in the dam itself, in the fill part of the dam, and that's not a good condition to have any pipes going through a dam because it's a risk of piping, a problem. So they want to relocate it to an area on the uphill edge where it's natural ground. That work is not the hard part. That's going to be done over here. The real hard part is that this red line that everybody's wondering about, why I haven't talked about it, is this is just the bypass. So it's a bypass from Ward Hill area, going all along through the pump station that's off of West Main Street at the town line, and then through these back properties, and coming through the woods all the way down to Route 20, and then onto town conservation land, and crossing over to get in to connect with the Tomlin Hill sewer. So they're about a 1 mile worth of surface pipe. It's just going to be sitting on the ground, but it's a situation where it's a pipe on the ground carrying sewage. So they need a permit. It's pretty close to some of the streams, and they're going to come in for a permit for all this. But I just wanted to make the commission aware, also to keep Brian here, the idea of, we've talked about a trail along the dam. My thought, and I had a preliminary meeting with the folks who are designing this, I said it probably could be a really good win-win situation, that when you lay this line, and you may need to clear a 6 to 8 foot pathway to get the line into this area. If we could plan that that pathway might be a future access for a trail that runs up through here and maybe connects into the back here, or even continues and connects into the road there, and we tie into Shrewsbury's system. So it's keeping the idea of a trail from Davis Street all the way along the dam and over into some system within Shrewsbury alive. So there's no details, there's no confirmation or no commitment, but they seem to be okay and like the idea, because they know they're asking for kind of, it's not a big impact because they're only crossing a wetland here and then here, and they're actually going to be going under, I think, in a culvert that already exists to get through here, but they're close to the wetlands, and they know they need a permit. They're actually going to be doing work in the wetland in this area where the dam is kind of slumped. But it's something that needs to get done, again, similar to that remediation, but hopefully we'll, on top of the remediation, the improvements to the dam, and we might even get a good trail location out of this as well. So just so you guys are all ready and aware of this. So if something comes up somewhere else, you're talking to someone, kind of keep that idea alive.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for the update.
Yeah. And if you have questions, I can maybe answer some of them.
Vinny, is above ground piping for storage common?
This is just gonna, it's common as a bypass. It's just a temporary bypass for when they do the actual change, because they have to shut the flow off going, actually, here it is, going under the dam to do the work. So it's probably gonna take them longer to put the bypass in than to do the work and reconnect it. It's just a lot of work, but there's nowhere else to connect because it runs within the wetland and in some really sensitive areas. So they are doing a good job keeping it out of those sensitive areas, but it's an extensive line. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I got some more questions, but we don't have to do them today. It's fine.
Good questions.
That treatment plant up there where the hook is, that's no longer in use, right?
I don't know. The treatment plant, no, but I think there's a pump station. There's a
Okay.
pump in that area. They mentioned a pump, and I'm not familiar with it. I didn't know enough to ask the questions, but if you can.
Don't ask me how I know, but there's a treatment plant there, and I don't remember how well it was shut down, but just curious.
Yeah, that sounds appropriate. There is no treatment plant,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure about a pump.
Yeah, there was a couple of tanks there.
Okay.
Okay, good. All right. What about the Route 20 reconstruction? MIPA.
Okay. Keep me moving. Good job. Where's that one? Shoot. Sorry about that. Thought I had it. That one. Too many windows open. I gotta find it. There it is. Okay. We got notice of a MIPA hearing for an environmental impact report. And what was proposed is reconstruction of Route 20 in Shrewsbury. So it does not, the road construction does not enter into the town of Northborough, but it comes right up to the town line. I don't think I have an overall. That probably would have been nice. I'm sorry about that, but generally this is the proposed work. You can kind of see a line here. That is the town line. And this is the parking lot to the motel and the little pub that is between Route 20 and Route 9, which is Route 9 runs right along to the north of this. and connects to Route 20 up in this area here. But what they're proposing is a couple of rotaries down farther south on Route 20 for a couple of the intersections. And those rotaries are part of a road improvement project. That road improvement project includes some stormwater enhancement, and they're proposing a stormwater treatment basin in this location here, which is right next to, actually, let me zoom in. This treatment basin is right next to a stream, Bop Brook or something like that.
Hop Brook?
Brook.
Not Hop, it's Bop or Bump Brook. It runs down by Walmart, right along Route 9. I forget the name of it, but it's a perennial stream that runs along, and they're proposing to put this stormwater basin pretty close to it. It's probably about 30 feet away.
Mm.
And the discharge comes out here to an existing discharge where the old street drainage used to just dump directly out. Now it's going to be going into a stormwater treatment basin and then coming out. So they're going to get some infiltration, some stormwater improvements, but still have a discharge to the little brook that's there. And then they still also have another discharge here. That's it's an existing discharge in that location. So that's the locations of the wetlands, and there's another sheet showing, well, it's got the riprap. Again, this is the town line here. This is Route 20, and Route 9 is up in this area here. Again, you can kind of see the town line coming through there. Do I have one more sheet? Zoom out so I can help you. Sorry. So this is all in Northborough. This is a match line to those two sheets. So there was most of the work is going off to the west of or to the south of this. And there is a little bit of edge work that's done. And this is the driveway that goes into the sports bar that's over there. It's a sports bar and motel, I think.
Mhm.
Does that make sense to you, locals?
Yeah.
Okay, the Christmas tree shops are to the south
Yep.
of this, farther off to the south.
Yep.
This is right at the intersection. So this is where Route 20 keeps going around, but they're proposing to do this work. And I just wanted to let you all know. And if there's any, so this is again, still Route 20. They're proposing to do some shoulder grading, and the stormwater treatment basin is next to the brook that goes into Northborough. And so your jurisdiction is within 100 feet of here, which catches the end of the stormwater treatment.
Okay.
So just to make you aware of all that again.
So eventually they'll file an NOI with us?
Yes, they will be filing an NOI with
It's
us.
at some point in time. I'm not sure if it's imminent or 6 months or whatever.
They just did the EIR, so I expect it'll probably happen in the next 4 to 6 months.
Okay. All right, good. It'll be interesting going to Route 20.
Yeah, for a while.
ADA trail opening at the senior center, April 1st, 4 to 6.
Yep, the grand opening, that's a notice. They've got a little celebration planned. Also for anyone interested, if the public's watching, the idea of, I think they're going to try to dedicate a bench to Craig Cox, who was a member of the Trails Committee, the Northborough Cultural Council, big with the Boy Scouts, really helpful with all their.
Very active in town.
Is very active in town. Did a lot for the town and passed away very unexpectedly a year or 2 years ago. So they're going to dedicate a bench to him in that area.
Okay, good. Good. That's it.
Yes.
Anything else somebody wants to bring up? Todd, you're good?
I'm good.
Dan?
All set.
John Johnson, how was the meeting? How was the MAC meeting?
It was very, very good. I learned a lot, learned some great terminology. The introduction meeting went well. Introduction to the Wetlands Protection Act was a good class. I strongly recommend any newcomers to take that session. It was really good. Attended a class on hydraulic modeling. That worked out well to help us go through that. That was good. And I got a chance to fool around with the state's new program when they come out with that hydraulic modeling. So that was kind of fun too. There was another class that I went to understand urban forestry. That one there, I will mention that that was a little driven by the company that held the class. I'll just leave it at that.
Get a certain slant, so.
Yes. And another good class too, Vinny, that I signed up for that was pretty good was the wetland replication projects. So as we go through, approving large sites that need to adjust their wetlands, that was a great class to understand how wetlands can be replicated and all the work and the amount of soil that gets moved and how it gets rebuilt. That was a great class. So thank you to the town of Northborough for letting me attend those classes. It was very informative.
Good, excellent.
That's good. I think we'll put you to use because we got a couple of projects that are going to be starting this summer with a little wetland restoration in them. So you'll be able to see it real life in the field.
Yeah, those were great. Thank you.
All right. And if we have nothing else, then we're April 14th, right?
Yes, and I will keep track of the state requirement to make it a remote meeting or to allow remote meetings, but I am planning for that to be in person.
Okay.
And actually, we probably could do it as a hybrid as well. Sounds like Dana can walk me through that.
Okay. All right. Then we need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I'll make that motion.
You are very good at that, Todd. Excellent. It's like one of your favorite motions. For a second.
I'll second it.
Second by John. Roll call. Dan Clark,
Yes.
Todd Helwig,
Yes.
John Johnson,
Yes.
and I'll say yes also. Thank you, folks. Enjoy the good weather this week.
Night,
See you
everyone.
next time.
I will. Yeah,
Talk to you
thank you
soon.
all.
Thank you, Vinny.
You're welcome.